Good evening. It is now 7 o'clock here in Bangkok, and it is my pleasure to go through and kick off the first in the AIT-SPIN Professional Intelligence Master Series. This evening we have got a fireside chat with Carl Boutet, and I would like to say a few words first of all about this new program, and then introduce the speaker. After the presentation, we'll have a few questions and answers with him, and then we'll say a few more words about the program. So to start off with, this new program is something which is a professional master's, an MS professional in professional intelligence. It runs here at AIT, and we define professional intelligence as the ability to go through and bring different levels of technical knowledge and expertise. We want to go through and merge that with a critical use of AI, especially around decision making, so that the type of professionals who join this program, as it says here, will stay adaptable and valuable to their organizations, so that their value add in the future is recognized. So essentially, this is a program that is for people who stay in work and they build up AI capabilities in this era, which almost every day there seems to be new opportunities and new challenges. So the way the program is structured, it's 36 credits, and it takes between 1.5 and 5 years. It's what we call a really compatible to people who are working full time, and we base it around this thing called high flex. So that's where you go through and get a lot of time to be able to go through and complete the 36 credits, and it's conducted via hybrid mode. So for those, there'll be some classes that people join in person and also via Zoom. Other classes will be Zoom only. And the course starts off with core competence courses relating to what we call the AI spine. So that's looking at data reasoning, generative AI, looking at governance, and other areas like design thinking. We also include leadership, sustainability, and there's courses around that relate to machine learning as well. The second part of the program relates to what you see on the right-hand side, which is a specialization stream or buffet in one of those areas. And then the program finishes off with a capstone, which is either 6 or 12 credits, and it relates to an applied real-world project that we want to work with people's businesses that relates to that particular aspect of the program. So who is the program for? This is a postgraduate study program, but mainly for working professionals in many different types of fields. So that could be engineers, scientists, those with a more technical specialist background. It can be for people who set up their own companies, people from public sector, development, NGOs, a whole range of different backgrounds that we see applying for this program. Essentially, what we're looking for are people who are curious to learn about AI and about how it is changing the world around them and how they can go through and generate a skill set to go through and thrive in that world. We'll have a series of these type of fireside chats. The one that you'll hear in a few moments' time, and we'd like to go through and thank Carl in advance for his time today, where he goes through and talks about 4 AI forces and the way that they go through and start that increasingly making decisions for us. One of the key points that I take away from the slides that I've seen is that judgment is something which we can be trained around, and this is at the heart of what the professional intelligence program is building. Particularly important is this area that there's a lot of convergence when it comes to the use of AI and in terms of the decision making that occurs afterwards. And he asks, where does that leave human distinctiveness? And also asks which of our decisions deserve to stay human. So these, for me, are what I see as the key points that relate to this new school and program in professional intelligence. Before we begin, if there's anything that you see today that you'd like to hear more about, or other programs and other chats, or you want to hear more about the program, we will be going through and sharing a QR code where you'll be able to learn more about the program after the presentation and Q&A has taken place. Without further ado, the speaker tonight, Carl, is somebody who is been working as a lecturer, adjunct faculty at AIT for the last 6 years, but is a practitioner with almost 30 years of experience, particularly looking at retail strategy, consumer behavior, and emerging technology. And he speaks around the world on these type of issues. He's based in Canada, but does a lot of work at McGill University. As I mentioned before, he teaches across AIT in Bangkok, Hanoi, and Ho Chi Minh City. He's also got 3 books about subjects linked to this. The latest one is called The Flip, and he'll be drawing upon some of the lessons that he's learned in writing that book for the session today. So I hope you go through and join me in welcoming Carl to this session this evening. Carl, over to you with your slides.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roger. It's a real privilege to be here this evening, and I think this is a very fitting way to kick off, I think, this webinar series, and honored to have you and especially introduce me, as you've played a very large role in having me in the region and getting involved with the school in the first place. So with AIT and now with this very exciting SPIN initiative that I'm really looking forward to supporting and anything in any way that I can. So let me just make sure I start off with the right slide here. Sorry about that. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. I was really excited when Zia reached out and the school reached out and said, hey, you know, we can maybe kick off this series with this new concept that this new book basically, but that I've been working on called The Flip. And as Rogers mentioned, I do have a lot of interest in how AI in general has been impacting a lot of different elements of how we, run our businesses, think about the path to purchase, for instance, and so on. So we're it's something that's been top of mind for me for the last at least 20 years. I do have 30 years of businesses, including as an entrepreneur, most of it, and as a consultant and advisor, and now more recently as an instructor and lecturer here in Montreal and in Southeast Asia. So what I want to do for the next 20-25 minutes before I have the fireside with Rogers, kind of give you one of the core tenets of this latest book, sort of one of the new frameworks that I've been thinking a lot about, especially in the last decade, as we've had more and more influence of AI in how we again operate, run, and strategize around our businesses. So I want to kick off with kind of the one sort of central question. If you look and think about the decisions you've made maybe today or just last couple of days, not just the big ones, a lot of the small ones as well. How many did you actually make all on your own? How many could you confidently say had no input or influence from some sort of algorithm or model or platform? I think many of us don't even recognize just how deeply the algorithms can be influencing our behaviors, our decisions. And obviously as a management school and a strategist, I'm thinking more on the business side of where these influences and these 100 decisions may come from. But the idea of even just how did you go from point A to point B today might probably was influenced on your ride to work or back home by an algorithm. The media you're consuming is definitely we know very much influenced by those algorithms, but also the decisions you're making in that business today, you made in your business today. Was there a business intelligence tool behind some of the data that you were going through and making recommendations based on to sort of influence the decision where the business is going? Are you trying to influence those, pass those influences onto your customers? And where does the algorithm skew in that case as well too? So there's really, I think, a lot of questions that we're more and more sensitive to as well. As Roger mentioned, The Flip was the third book. My first book was called The Great Acceleration, which was basically how the pandemic would have accelerated, the influence of digital on the path to purchase, predominantly caused by lockdowns and things like that, where we sort of all of a sudden were forced into many digital channels. And yes, we did revert back afterwards to some more physical, traditional means, but the reality is a lot of those digital influences remained. And then my second book was called Blind Spot, and that was how basically LLMs and generative AI really caught us off guard. We thought we knew how technology was shaping us, and then we found out in the December of 2022 the power of these algorithms. And since then, while that acceleration has continued, and the flip has come along, and it's this idea of where value creation is flipping, basically, as we were at the core of value creation. Now we're wondering if the algorithms are increasingly at the core of that value creation. So a lot of that thinking for me has come from this very sort of classic graph. It's, if it comes from the Gartner maturity curve, data maturity curve. And I've been teaching and using this in my speaking as well too for over a decade, because I think it talks a lot about where and how value is created in the first place, and why we might be tempted to let the algorithms decide for us more and more. Let the algorithms sort of replace a lot of our judgment, because they seem to be more and more effective at doing so. So just as a reminder for those who haven't maybe had the chance to see these kinds of graphs before, it's the idea that, as we get better and better at using data, not just collecting it and then using it to basically interpret what's happened in the past, but also to help predict what will happen in the future, and then ultimately actually create actions based on those predictions. So not just understand that it's going to rain, but to actually have the umbrella in hand, ready for the rain automatically in sort of a proverbial way. So the idea here of the data of this curve, and how we've moved up this curve quite rapidly, especially in the last, I would say, 3-4 years, as the tools have become much more sophisticated, yet also accessible. We see that, maybe 5 years ago, 80-90% of companies were probably in the lower half here, working around the what happened and why did it happen piece of the business. Basically, all your dashboards and your traditional business intelligence tools, as they presented your last quarter, your last week, and you were sort of basing your assumptions on that data. But now we've seen, in the last 2-3 years especially, how the tools have come along and say, well, now that we know that happened, here's what we can anticipate will happen, and here are the actions we should be taking based on that anticipation. So we're seeing that the algorithms are playing a much larger role across the spectrum. And as I think Roger mentioned briefly, and we've seen across all disciplines, how data science is finding its way into every piece of the value chain. From where we decide to, what products we decide to sell, to where we decide to source those, the inputs for those products and services, all the way through to how they're distributed, how they're delivered, how they're serviced, and even where the loyalty and how we sort of address the loyalty of those customers. The data science, the algorithms, the AI, for in broader terms, is all around us. It is truly omnipresent and ubiquitous. So we see that as a truly changing moment in how we conduct our businesses. But that does also come with its fair share of risks, because on both sides we have this idea of a compression occurring. And this is something particular that I'm spending a lot of time now in the age of agentic AI, where basically that top of the line where we're getting more and more prescriptive. Well, what I think is happening here is this traditional funnel, which this is a very well-established marketing model, where we think about how do customers and even our own employees and the people we work with, how do they come to make a decision? We sort of had this traditional, very linear process that we've been studying for decades around how do consumers, how do our customers come to find and conduct business with us, and we used to have a very specific way to think about each one of these steps and how we would influence those, usually through marketing strategies, but there could be other elements at play here as well. But what we've just seen, and this is now happening very quickly around us, and thinking about where the algorithms can actually act on our behalf, while we can much more quickly go from the discovery and saying, oh, I know your company exists, to actually consuming from your company, signing the service agreement. And we're seeing more and more examples of automation and agentic coming into play here, and saying, well, we can basically flatten this funnel and get it straight, that within a millisecond from the moment that you're aware, the action is already taken in this new agentic world, where we can let the algorithms decide for us and even take action for us. So there's preliminarily these 4 forces, which is the core of what we're talking about tonight, that are influencing all of these elements. And I've tried to unpack it. So I should say, first, I was not a fan of the word AI when I went back and did my data science course at the Computer Science and AI Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at MIT back in 2014. We were talking about big data, and we've been trying to get away from the word artificial intelligence because it's sort of a catch-all, right? We talk about AI as sort of this basket where we sort of put any sort of emerging new technology and just kind of slap an AI sticker on it and think that pretty much, represents what's happening. But I've often counter-argued saying it's like calling something the internet, or calling something electricity, or even more so calling something math and statistics. Like, what is the real value there? So I find it important to sort of unpack these and put them in frameworks that help us better understand what's happening and why we're being so influenced by the algorithms. And I have this model called the 4 forces that I introduced in the latest book, that sort of has been there all along, but wasn't named in such manner. So the 4 forces we're going to go through are optimization, automation, immersion, and contextualization. They don't necessarily happen in silos. They overlap. They influence one another, but I think they still kind of help us better break down and understand the influences of this kind of digital layer. Quite honestly, it's been surrounding us, and I could say thickening in a lot of ways around us as we get more and more information, more and more data that feeds into these 4 forces. So let's break these down briefly, and we can obviously go a little deeper into them during the conversation afterwards. I think the first one that we all kind of recognize is this optimization. It's sort of the core tenet of AI data science, and especially the models now through deep learning are able to detect and see patterns that most of us may not have caught, and we have very good examples, even going back to AlphaGo when there was the famous Go game, and the algorithm was basically able to see patterns that the best Go player in the world could not see, and win basically the game based on the fact that those patterns would lead to a victory. So we've had a lot of confidence and letting the models sort of optimize for us and find the best routes. Again, find the best sourcing, find the best delivery, find the best, most efficient way to engage, to reach and engage our customers. So the idea here is, we remove all these frictions. We get, we try to reduce the amount of choices as well for our consumers, which in some ways might sound like a bad thing, but there's a lot of customers out there that are sort of overwhelmed with choices today, and they are very happy to sort of defer to the algorithm. So let's not necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's something we need to be conscious of, because if we're optimizing, and we're usually optimizing on very similar data sets, then we got to maybe have some questions around some of the outcomes of that optimization that we'll get back to in a second. So, as the last sentence here says, the decision is already made before the customer arrives at it, because we've been in and put ourselves in that position as well, not just customers, but again, employees and companies, and how we make decisions. Back to our 100 questions earlier today, how were they influenced? Secondly, automation. So, off of that optimization, we can automate once we know the path, once we can kind of see what the stages are and how we optimize for those stages, for each one of those touch points, for instance. Well, we could often automate that. And we're seeing that, day after day. I think robotics is kind of the clear example here, where people sort of right away make that association, say, yeah, if we know the best way to do something, and if it's in any way repetitive, then it's easy to automate. Well, now even the harder things we're automating as we have more and more sophisticated tools to do so. And automation doesn't necessarily need to be physical. We think a lot in those physical robot context, but think about all the sort of the keystrokes and every little thing that we're doing. And again, if it's at all repetitive, let's say if we're producing reports for the companies we work for, and it's the same report that we tend to produce week after week, quarter after quarter, chances are that this is very much a task that the algorithm will take over and start producing those reports on our behalf. So then again, the question, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Does that really allow us to put more time into more meaningful work? I would hope so, but it also has some risks tied to the output of that work. So again, things to consider as the locus of control shifts to code, as we have here, and human judgment begins to feel like an inefficiency rather than an asset. Is that truly the case? And where should we be thinking about where value is created in that context? The third one is something that I'm particularly fond of in emerging technologies, of trying to follow and understand how digital is we're being immersed in more and more in these digital worlds. Much of that immersion has come from these supercomputers we've been walking around with in our pockets for the last 2 decades almost now, but especially their power has been exponential, and their draw and pulling and sort of immersing us has become stronger and stronger. But I think we're going to see more and more technologies come out that are going to take us away from just purely looking at screens, be it a phone or a laptop or whatever, to get and immerse ourselves in the data in many ways. But we're seeing now audio, we're seeing haptics, touch. We're going to see all the senses soon be stimulated by this immersion, this idea that are happening to us. Maybe it's an audio cue that we didn't even quite pick up on, but that might have some influence on a behavior that we're going to have as we come out of the BTS in Bangkok and decide that maybe there's a shopping trigger that happens there that we didn't even recognize, that could come through different ways. So immersion is a little more sort of frontier right now, but we're seeing it more and more. And obviously, if any of you are interested in in video gaming and those sort of things, well, those technologies are already well advanced, including headsets and things like that are more and more sort of immersing us, into these virtual worlds. Now, immersion, I don't really believe is going to be a virtual thing. I think it's more of a mixed reality that we're sort of day after day stepping into, where the data is playing a bigger and bigger role and influencing how, again, we behave and the decisions we make. And then there's contextualization. It plays into that immersion, but beyond that. So this idea that we're able to contextualize, we're able to understand more and more these. In marketing, we call these moments of truth, where we try to understand what it is that's happening around a person that influences that decision. So immersion is obviously in there, but there's a lot more happening. There's a lot more we can do with data. We can get into sentiment analysis. We have neuromarketing now, where we're even at the synapse level of our brains trying to understand what influences what. So how do we contextualize that information? How do we take that data in more and more sophisticated ways? And coming back to that first point around how the deep learning and can see patterns that nobody else, that the human eye would be, or human brain would have troubles understanding. Contextualization is really deeper and deeper, and what we can do within that contextualization is obviously a lot of personalization, so that each one of our customers, each one of our employees, each one of our coworkers are treated. It can be treated differently because we have a lot more context around their behaviors, what it is that's influencing them, all the little subtle signals that are happening in every little way. So the algorithms are playing a very big role there, and we know we're just going to get more and more powerful and understanding how that contextualization influences our behaviors. So one of the takeaways that Dr. Roger mentioned, was this concern around when everyone optimizes, everyone converges, and that's especially true again depending on the data sets, and maybe it's an overgeneralization, but it is still a strong trend. If we're running off of the same data more and more, if we're using the same tools, if we're using the same LLMs, for instance, to create our reports and our suggestions from those reports, then what happens? Well, those are the same algorithms and the same models that our competitors have. And what happens in that case is, I think, and this is maybe a marketing analogy around this sea of sameness, is this idea that the outputs start looking more and more the same. So the marketing campaigns, and you probably have already noticed this in the way you consume media. If you're looking on TikTok or Instagram, you're probably saying, hey, a lot of these campaigns are starting to look the same. They're sort of speaking to me in the same language. The visuals are looking more and more similar. Everything's sort of being optimized to a point where everything looks the same. And that is, quite honestly, my biggest concern, at least on the marketing side. I won't, we can get into more societal concerns around this as well too, but let's just keep it at sort of the commercial marketing level. How do you differentiate? How do you stand out? And it's something that, it's a model or a framework that I've been working with a long time that I won't be sharing this evening, but something I would definitely be sharing. And if we have the opportunity to go deeper in this at AITSPIN and understand sort of these influences, but something I call the relevance index, where I think about how do we differentiate? How do we stand out? It's sort of the core of my work from the very beginning around marketing and branding, and thinking about, okay, well, what really sets us apart? What makes a customer choose us rather than our competitor? Because if you look at this scene right now and somebody who's walking through an environment like this, well, what makes them decide that you're the one, that you're the company that they should be working with, that you're the brand that they should be choosing? So I think there's a lot of concern right now for me anyways, and it's maybe I'm sort of projecting here because today it still hasn't gotten quite to this level, but I feel we're on this sort of trajectory where the four forces are sort of bringing us towards this sea of sameness, because again, the tools are readily available, they're super powerful, they're definitely tempting to sort of delegate and even relegate to, but I would there's a word of caution obviously built into that. So what does stay human? Where do we kind of stand in? Where can we have true impact? Well, there's sort of four places here that I think we could talk about, and again in the conversation with Dr. Roger afterwards, think a little more specifically. But judgment, that's what matters. What is it? Even though the algorithm is pointing us in a direction, the model's telling us this is how we need to optimize, do we have maybe some other references, some other concerns? Are we picking up on some signals that we think can help us, truly differentiate and matter to our customers? Taste, is there something where we're saying, no, like this is not what we stand for? There's just something that we have a certain position in the market and a certain way that we want to stand out. And even if the algorithm is sort of pushing us away from that, well, maybe we purposely want to, and maybe at the cost, yes, of maybe losing some customers, because the algorithm might be right in some ways, saying, well, you'll get a bigger customer base, but maybe over the longer term, we're not going to differentiate and we're not going to stand out, and we're going to, yes, we'll gain short term, but we might end up losing medium and long term because our competitors can step in and maybe do some of those things better than we can around those elements that made us special in the first place that we might be getting away from. trust. I mean, I think that's one of the big ones right now. We all have a lot of concerns around the influence of these models, and can we trust everything that comes from them? And we have time and time again examples of hallucinations that come up, and where we worry about what are the recommendations that are coming out of that, the reports that are being automatically generated. Are there hallucinations that we didn't even catch within those reports that are influencing the direction our company's taking and maybe bringing us on the wrong path? And then there's context beyond the room. There's this the famous case still to this day, as powerful as our tools are and our models are. I mean, they can contextualize millions of different data points, but they still can't tell the time, which I think is a sort of fitting metaphor here. Because if you ask ChatGPT what time it is, chances are it's gonna trip up. But if you can ask it, to interpret some customer signals, well, maybe it can ingest millions of data points and give you very confident responses, but still without knowing what time it is. Quite unless it's in a data set that was already predetermined and it showed a timestamp. So the models are still struggling to give us that full context, and some signals are just truly intuitive. And one thing we still believe, at least I do, around the models are lacking is empathy. So is there something around empathy that sort of influences that context beyond what the data is telling us? So basically what I'm saying here is the machines optimize, and that's great. We can defer some of that optimization. I think we need to defer, and I hope I'm not sounding like I'm anti-AI or anti-data science, or, I'm quite the contrary. I've been very, very bullish on it and encouraging my students from being the week, literally, that ChatGPT released. I was teaching the digital marketing and consumer analytics course in Hanoi. And we started using it that week because I think these are tools that we have to be able to use and become very proficient at. But at the same time, I think that judgment piece, that trust piece, and understanding what it is that's worth optimizing. What is the way I break it down is what do you relegate, meaning you sort of give full control to, and what do you delegate? What do you actually say, okay, the machine can do this part, it's not where I add the most value, so I'll let the machine sort of, at least as a co-pilot in Microsoft speak, help me get to a certain place. But what am I, what's the value that I'm bringing on top of that? What am I optimizing for? And then sort of weave. And I think the general consensus now is, we talk a lot about human in the loop, the idea that it's machine plus a human. So the idea, how do we sort of, weave these two things together as the models become more and more powerful, but we still need to sort of make sure that we maintain a lot of that control. So I think the other takeaway is, the idea that judgment is trainable, the idea that we can help you think about these different use cases and how to unpack them and how to make the most of the opportunity while still creating the greatest value in that value chain, not just letting the algorithm dictate what that value is going to be. And we call that professional intelligence. And I think when I learned about the creation of this school and the fact it was a professional intelligence school, I think this is where we're at. Where digital transformation is always going to be occurring. That's an ongoing process that's not, we cannot get away from. But I think we're at the next stage of that, which is really, okay, what do we do now? We've been transforming digitally for decades now. We've been that transformation has generated an abundance of data that we now have the tools to interpret that data. But what do we, how do we create that extra layer? So interrogate the systems you use. So think about where, try to really understand as much as you can. A lot of these algorithms and models are black boxes. It's hard to always fully appreciate how they come to the decisions they do come, but try to understand more and more what the inputs are. Keep the criteria, delegate the calculation. So again, it can be hard to beat an algorithm when it comes time to picking up all the different data points and pulling them together and having some sort of calculation from those data points. but how, which data points we want to let the machines take as trust, for instance. Well, that's, I think, up to us to really to dictate that, and practice deciding when machines can't. They ultimately we have to remain accountable as managers, as business leaders, as people that are playing critical roles, I'm sure, in our organizations. We have to step in. I think one of the big concerns we've had at the broadest level is, if we get to a point where we relegate all our decisions, then who's ultimately accountable? And I think the human has to remain always accountable. The manager has to remain accountable to the output. So let's always make sure that we keep a real tight grasp on that. So that's what we have. You have a QR code here that if you want to, you can have access to this deck. I shared a couple of quick models in there. I'm easily reachable, and I hope to be able to have the opportunity to keep engaging with you through SPIN, AITSPIN. So without further ado, considering we're trying to keep this, I think, on track time-wise, I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I'll let Dr. Roger come back on stage so that we can pick this up and have a conversation around how I very quickly unpack these four forces.
Thank you so much, Carl. Really timely presentation, and resonates really well with the new program, the new school at AIT, and especially as your book has only been released in the last 1 or 2 months. So it's something which is hot off the press, and really go through and see some of these major areas that relate to AI and the future, and that there is positives out there, and there's some degree of apprehension at times as well about some of those potentials. So I guess the first starting question is just to add a bit more about when did you start noticing your own decision making? What were the moments that you said, wow, okay, this is where I'm delegating my responsibility elsewhere? When did it strike you for the first time?
I don't know if it was first time. Well, I'll give two quick examples. So I think the blind spot when I started writing that book came from that week in Hanoi. AIT's played a big role for these last two books, and it was the fact that the morning that basically ChatGPT released to the public, we were in class. And that morning, we started playing around with it, just because what got my attention was an article in Bloomberg saying, could this be the Google killer? And if I'm teaching digital marketing, if something's going to kill Google, it's probably something worth telling the students about. And we got back from the first break in the morning, and one of our students, and I talk about this in Blind Spot, basically came back from the break and said, I used ChatGPT to do a memo to my employees because I only had 15 minutes and I had to get information out quickly. So I thought, maybe this tool can help me. And so he used it, and I asked, I said, how did it go? And he's like, it was fabulous. Like, it really did, like, pretty much as good as I could have. And this is like a chief information officer. Like, this is not for a very large pharmaceutical company in the region there. So he said, and I was like, okay, well, that's pretty impressive already. And this is the first model that was open to the public, the first ChatGPT. And I said, well, then you have, the headache of translating it, making sure that it goes out in Vietnamese to your colleagues. Like, no, it wrote it in Vietnamese. And for me, that was like, oh my God. And I went back in 2014 to MIT to study data science. So I thought I was on top of this. I thought I was feeling pretty confident about the influence of data science, and had been following some LLMs along the way. And this one just kind of, wow. So that was sort of the first one. The second quick one is actually the book writing process. And I'm being pretty transparent about this and tell my students all the time. I mean, I'm not, I said earlier, anti-AI, to the opposite. I think we need to leverage it. And just how I've written the 3 books and how that's changed from the Great Acceleration, which was really all me with a writing assistant that helped me sort of dissect some of the interviews for that book, to the second one, where Blind Spot, where I basically was using the LLMs more as a sort of a sophisticated spell check, and making sure that I was, the grammar and the flow was good. And we called it polish. It was sort of the thing then, how I was using. To the third one, where in the first paragraph of the book, I come right out and said, I don't even know if I wrote this book. because I had the co-pilot with me the whole time. I think it was about a 12-month process, and I just literally released it officially 2 weeks ago in Bangkok when I was teaching. So it did a lot of, again, affiliations to AIT, and so I say, at the end of the day, they're my ideas, they're my frameworks, my concepts. But I mean, I had this AI, I had a couple of different models actually working with me the whole time through, challenging me, to helping me think through some of the assumptions, providing some guidance around, maybe you should rethink this sort of way of presenting this idea, or here's maybe a better way to present the idea. So I mean, we get to a point where by the time I have the finished product, where I have the actual book here, I'm like, how much of this did I actually write, and how much of this did the LLM write? And I don't have an exact answer for that. I mean, I wish I could say that each one of those words are mine. That would not be true. But the thoughts are mine, and the output is mine, and I'm accountable for it. So whatever happens out of this, well, that I guess ultimately becomes my work. But the reality is, the influence of that work is very much a process of leverage.
I think those who are listening, there's probably quite a few there that in the same boat as you, in terms of what they have to go through and develop something that's being written. How much is that being co-piloted by AI as well? That's a nice phrase. The second question relates to the four forces, and do you feel that one of the four might be accelerating faster than the other three, or is there one that's underestimated, that some of those people might be listening going, oh yeah, okay, that makes some sense, but I hadn't thought about this any of the other forces? So one underestimated and one that might be accelerating quicker than the other three.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends the point of measure, and there's so many different variables and around industries and regions. And one of my favorite phrases from Gibson is, the future is already here. It's not evenly distributed, meaning that a lot of, depending on how where the organization is at in its adoption, and we know there's still a lot of concerns even around just data integrity. Are we the old garbage in, garbage out is truer than ever. But I think optimization is clearly the one that's getting away from us. I mean, because the algorithms have become so good, and we do have an abundance of data. So we should be, I think that would be natural. If I had to generalize, I think that would be the one that's pushing the furthest ahead, and it's happening quicker and quicker every day. I mean, I'm pretty sure in your work as well, you might be seeing, signals of that, and even just how we come here and create a new school. Think about when you created the digital, the digital transformation program, and now thinking about this program, how different that process is probably being. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I could assume that there's probably more algorithms at work optimizing sort of how we get to where we are this morning, or this evening in your case. And then the one that's, I think, least probably understood and probably is the immersion piece. I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of it is subconscious. I think we don't even know all the contextualization that's happening around us, the signals. And a perfect example of that is social media. I mean, I think social media are sort of the Trojan horse here. I mean, I think they're the ones that have done this, going back to Cambridge Analytica, and now which now seems quaint, to the way that now the large language models can sort of amplify that in a way that we don't even understand, quite honestly. I think we have a lot of researchers out there trying to tap the brakes and trying to understand. And we had this example of Fable more recently, and Mythos, and these things that have really kind of caught us. And we're like, okay, this contextualization can be dangerous as well too. So I think that's the one that's probably underestimated, while the optimization is roaring ahead. You're on mute.
We've got about another 5 or 7 minutes to go. I do notice we've got one question that's popped into the chat box. I wonder if you would mind taking that question.
Sure, for Chris. Hey, Chris. So what do you feel would be the solution to model collapse as a result of ever more AI-generated outputs in the world? So model collapse, I guess, is the compression idea of how we get, basically from milliseconds, we can go from awareness to action. And how do I feel about the result of that? I mean, I think, again, if you're a business leader and you need to think about how you differentiate in the market and how you create value for your customers, there are parts of that collapse you're going to lean into. You're going to be like, this is not where we differentiate. If convenience, for instance, which is one of the 4 attributes I use in the relevance matrix that I didn't share here, but I talk a lot about in this idea of frictionless. You're like, yeah, you know what? The model's doing a great job there. But when it comes to purpose and what we stand for, which is another of the attributes, well, no, we're gonna create some friction there. We're gonna purposely do some things that are gonna maybe slow down the process, make it really clear to the customer what we stand for, where we create value, what we're not gonna delegate or relegate, even more importantly, to the technology, because we want to have more human in the loop. We want to have a higher customer sort of touch point where we engage and insist that somebody speak to somebody in our organization before they make that final purchase, as an example. We want or maybe not. Maybe you're saying that's not where the value, our artisanry is in the product itself, or in the service, and the way we deliver that product or service, the way we onboard the customer, for us is not a value add. It doesn't differentiate us in the market. So I think those are all things that we're thinking about, and those AI generated outputs. Well, again, at that sea of sameness, I don't think anybody's going to win in that. So how do we stand out, and how do we make sure that becomes something that's remains true to us? So I don't know if that answers your question, Chris, but happy to go further in that, and especially hopefully in the context of a program at SPIN.
Maybe taking what you've just said, the answer a bit further along the training side, and I'm trying to link this back to the program that's being developed that starts in August. But there are elements of the AITSPIN program, some of the core courses, some of the electives, which go back to sort of how do you train yourself to be able to go through and deal with some of the complexities that you are discussing here. I just wonder, from your vision, Carl, and you deal with other universities as well, how do you feel that some of them train, or how would you imagine that training would practically look like, especially around the sort of the interrogation? Because you mentioned there's 3 ways to help train, but if you just dwelt upon the interrogation side of it, how do you practically train yourself to be able to interrogate? Is this about setting a new habit that you do this on a daily basis? I mean, how would you go about that? Yeah, what will be the thought process, and what will be the practical ways of doing the training?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think it always starts just with having a level of consciousness, right, of what it is that's influencing your decisions in the first place. What are the inputs? What's happening around you that's making you make those decisions, and then contextualizing them. And there's a whole spectrum here, and it also will fall back on the amount of experience you have. If you're just starting and you're fresh out of university, you have very little work experience, it'd be normal that you would be more inclined to sort of go along with where the algorithms are bringing you. If you've been working for 20, 30 years in that industry, and you understand a lot of the subtleties that or nuances that somebody who's starting might not have, then you're looking at it from a different angle, and you're maybe pushing back a lot more, and challenging some of those assumptions. Yeah, I think there's a lot to think about, and even with the other universities. But one of the reasons I'm known, I think, in my classes to bring in a decent amount of guest speakers is to try to convey some of that long industry knowledge, people that have been at the highest levels of some of these organizations, and come and talk to or at the cutting edge. This past course, I had one of the leading worldwide thought leaders around agentic commerce, trying to understand, and who's in the models and is basically at the code level looking at what ChatGPTs make, the changes they're making in the way that the data that they ingest are influencing some of the marketing campaigns, for instance. So I think for me, that's the way to do it, is try to bring not just my knowledge, but bring as much knowledge of people around me in different circumstances, from different business leaders and people that are ahead of the curve in most cases, to try to share some of that, so that we can take that as all part of our signals. The other piece too that I try to do as much is sort of do a cross mix of industries and regions. I think there's a lot of opportunity, back to the Gibson quote, of that uneven distribution. How can we pull that in? How can we learn, if I'm in pharmaceutical, something that may be happening in automotive, or might be happening in retail could have really interesting impacts, and vice versa. And that's where I find like a lot of the best innovation comes from, is that cross-disciplinary, and that's where I encourage the students to really engage in exchange, because they come already with knowledge within sometimes those industries. So how can we learn from each other? It's because they might have tackled that problem in a completely different way, or that opportunity. And that's, I think, is some of the richest learning we can get.
And looking at the AIT SPIN program, and there'll be people here today interested in what the program has to offer with some of these questions at the back of their mind, is that there are programs and courses around AI data reasoning, looking at responsible AI governance. So I think those are the two of the courses that will actually come back to some of the discussions we've had here this evening. Looking into the chat box, there are two other questions. One is from Rabin, and there's a request from Jingjing to for you to share the link to your book again. So maybe you could share that link and then answer Rabin's question as well. And then we're more or less finished for this first fireside chat.
Yeah. So what do you think, in what contexts we have to familiar with AI, what context we should avoid? Again, there's no simple answer here. And I don't think you can avoid AI. I think it's like saying avoiding electricity or avoiding the internet. You can go off the grid. I mean, you can make that decision to just completely go and, feed off the forest if you want. But I think the idea is it's more, I'm not saying avoid, and I'm always saying aware, just be conscious. And I'm glad, Roger, that you mentioned the ethics and the governance piece. I think that's, in some cases, we're going to have to, maybe rely more on that, because we're going to need some guidance at a higher level, be it even governmental, but mostly from our organizations. They're going to give us hopefully some, or maybe we can help influence in our organizations what that guidance is, coming from those classes in ethics and governance. Is something that I try to speak more and more to, but at the same time, again, not entirely avoidable. And as much as we would want to block the models, in some cases, they're happening all around us. So I think the context maybe where you got to be more concerned about is anything that really helps you differentiate in the market. Like if you have some sort of competitive advantage in the market, something that sets you apart, you want to be extra protective of that and make sure that the models and algorithms aren't pushing you in a direction that brings you away from that differentiation. I keep coming back to differentiation. For me, it's sort of a core tenet of all the work I do, and how I just think about how we create value in the market. So that would be the one I would spend more attention to. Thank you for the question about that. I mean, I'm not here to push a book. I don't, the book sales for me are not a big thing. It's more a way for me to actually, each one of these books is just kind of a way for me to crystallize a lot of the things that are happening in my head, and have a document to show for that, I guess, in some way. But I have a digital edition that an MBA student actually helped me put together as well too, a very talented artist, and it's the book is the flipbook.online. If you want to find it there, I can put it in the chat, or you can just find me on LinkedIn, and you have the QR code. I was in my slides too, that I don't know, maybe I went a little too quickly on, but so there's a lot of different ways to get to me, and my website. So probably the easiest is just to find me on LinkedIn and take it from there. But I hope to mostly see you all in the SPIN, a SPIN session at some point. It sounds like I'm not a cycling session. I'm not going to be giving cycling spin cycle courses. I'm going to be giving hopefully some courses that are going to help you think about how this all impacts your work and how you're going to create value in your organizations.
That's great, Carl. Thank you very much. Well, we've reached the end of our time limit for today. I would like to go through and just share really quickly two QR codes. The first one relates to the AIT SPIN website, and the second is the AIT SPIN flyer. So I'll just hold that up there for a few seconds, for those of you who want to go through and take a photo of that. Okay. And then one more time to go through and say thank you very much, Carl, for waking up early today in your time in Montreal to go through and join us. You were in Bangkok in the last couple of weeks, but lovely to go through and see you. And we have other AIT SPIN fireside chat events coming up in the days and weeks ahead. So we look forward to seeing some of you there for that. And we had a really nice attendance today, so really nice for you to go through and give up your time, Carl, but also the people who've listened to this session today. And no doubt you'll see some of them in the class in the future, and other sessions as well. Maybe there's one last question that I can see that's just come through to me into the chat box.
I think it's a thank you.
Is there one other question here? One last question?
I just think it's a thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a question more about really about the program and about what makes AITSPIN a bit different to other programs. So maybe not quite for you to go through and answer, Carl. As an advisor to this program, I would say that one of the big differences is that every single course has got AI embedded in it. So you could take different specializations. You could take one around, if you did the business management one, you'd look at storytelling, you'd look at marketing, you'd look at finance, you'd look at operations, and you'd work out. And the lecturers will go through and talk about how is AI changing that particular subject area of the industry. And the same thing would be for the engineering specializations, the core subjects as well. So that's one aspect that I would see a difference. And look at the prospectus. There's other selling points from that prospectus that go through and talk about the key aspects of the program. I think another key part that I find interesting is the high flex mode, and the way that the people around you on the program will come from very different backgrounds that you might not experience elsewhere on similar programs which look at AI. So there's some of the ways in which I think there's going to be a bit of a difference. But for now, given that we are now out of time, thank you, Carl. Thank you, everybody else, for your time today, and look forward to seeing some of you at the next session coming up shortly. Thank you very much. Good evening and good morning.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.